What's going on? This is TJ Murphy, and welcome to another episode of Adventurous Entrepreneurs. I am so excited because my guest today is Christy Innouvong-Thornton, founder of Tuk Tuk Box, a Southeast Asian community brand, and co-founder of Courageous Kitchen, a 501c3 charity for internationally displaced persons, including survivors of forced migration and trauma. Christy has been featured in Bangkok 101 magazine, Travel and Leisure, the San Diego Union Tribune, Good Day Sacramento, BuzzFeed, New York Magazine, and a whole lot more throughout her nearly a decade of work in social enterprises. I'm really excited to be dropping this episode here in May because this month is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Christy's family came to the US as refugees from Laos, and in retracing her Asian heritage, she has made it her mission to mentor young leaders through holistic education with an emphasis on Southeast Asian women. We dive into her story and a whole lot more throughout this action-packed episode. But just a few of the golden takeaways Christy is going to share with you are solopreneur struggles to social enterprise success, lessons in resilience and self-care from Christy's personal journey, the power of why, finding identity and purpose through food and culture, a social entrepreneur's guide to innovation and community building, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, this is me and Christy Innouvong-Thornton. Welcome to the Adventurous Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm your host, TJ Murphy. Since quitting my corporate 9-to-5 and starting a business while backpacking through Asia back in early 2017, I've had the privilege of learning from some incredibly adventurous entrepreneurs. Through these conversations and my own journey, I've learned that much like in life, entrepreneurship is an adventure. On this podcast, I explore the journeys of top-performing leaders in their fields. These wide-ranging conversations include tactical business advice, how I built this insights, lessons in leadership, life hacks, travel stories, favorite hobbies, and insights into living a purposeful and joy-filled life. Adventures await us, so let's dive in. Hey, Christy, welcome to Adventurous Entrepreneurs.
Hey TJ, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Been looking forward to this all week. It's been a long time coming. We met like over a year ago and talked about this, and
Yep.
here we are, thanks to a mutual friend, Bjorn, who's been on the episode or on the podcast a couple times. So really excited for this one, and you have an amazing story. So I want to start with a little bit of background on your journey. Can you just tell us a little bit about your story leading to becoming the adventurous entrepreneur you are today, and specifically how you've been able to let go of fear along the way?
Hmm. Well, first off, shout out to Bjorn for introducing us and making this happen. He's a longtime friend, family.
It's a great guy.
And I met him in Seattle, Washington, Shoreline specifically, where we both kind of grew up in our adolescence. And I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit and just didn't realize it.
Hmm.
Like I was a kid that was like having the lemonade stands, but would also sell like cookies and pizza on the side.
Yeah. How
And
can
like
we
any
squeeze even more money out of this
right,
thing?
like nickel and diming people or
Yeah.
like buying the Costco size like snack boxes and then like
Reselling
charging,
it.
yeah,
Yep.
reselling it. So grew up in Seattle, Washington. My parents are refugees from Laos, and they actually escaped during the like after the Vietnam War, but during this or after the Secret War in Laos. So many people don't know about the Secret War.
Yep.
Um, but it's essentially where the US dropped bombs for 9 years straight onto Laos to basically rid themselves of excess ammunition
Yep.
from Vietnam. And so many Southeast Asian families ended up in Seattle, Washington, and were resettled there and sponsored by mostly like white Christian, very homogenous society. So my dad's sponsors were actually Mormon. And so I grew up in like white Mormon suburbia,
Mm.
very disconnected from any part of like Asian culture or Lao culture. Um, it was like pretty normal childhood that I would say normal childhood. But now, like as I'm older, I realize it's very different from most of my peers. But grew up there kind of just, playing soccer and being involved in like girls' camp.
Yeah.
And then in high school, like really wanted to get more involved into community. and started volunteering a lot at the Parks and Rec department and like hosting events, and realized like I loved it and I thrived in it. And so I guess I would say like that's kind of when like the the love for like people and PR and really getting involved in like learning about marketing and business started.
And I'm curious about, being the proud daughter of refugees. You came over to Seattle from Laos, which, having visited Laos and been in areas where there's still live munitions, it's still
Yes.
something that people there are living with to this day. And like you said, most people living in the US have no idea that that happened. We just
Right.
dumped all the bombs and everything that we didn't use, and most of it's still being cleaned up to this day, and it's tragic. So, not my point, but wanted to make that
Yeah.
point even more
Thank
clear.
you.
So, as the daughter of refugees, how has your family's journey over to the US and, assimilating into American life really shaped your approach to entrepreneurship and life? You mentioned, like,
Mm.
at a young age being very entrepreneurial. I'm curious if there's anything that your family, excuse me, kind of helped instill in you, or things that you saw your parents doing that helped shape that.
Um, well, they've always been really resourceful. So I was born in Seattle, so thankfully privileged not to have gone through that kind of trauma of resettlement. Um, my mom, her side of the family, like floated on a banana tree trunk across the Mekong River to
Wow.
escape while bombs and um, guns were basically being shot at them.
Hmm.
And so I think that, even from the womb or from before that, like my family has had this forced resilience. Um, and I don't take that word lightly, and I don't really like it when people call me resilient because I don't necessarily want to be. It's because of struggle and trauma that we've had to be. And I like to call myself like a hustler and humanitarian.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
I've always seen like my mom and my dad work multiple jobs, and kind of try to do whatever they had to do to survive. And then growing up with my grandparents, like my grandfather, he had a pretty good job, like an electrical design engineer or something like that. And so my grandma
Mhm.
never had to work. And so um, in high school, he actually got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And my grandmother, at almost 70 years old, had to go back into the workforce.
Mm,
And seeing that struggle, like both from my parents' side and
yeah.
then from my grandparents who were here, right, in America, never kind of went through that, it like sparked something in me of like, one, I'm never gonna rely on a man to take care of me, but I always want to have something of my own just in case. Because my grandmother went back into the workforce with like no skills, no job skills. She left probably in the 40s or 50s and then
Wow.
went back in the 90s. And so
A lot had
thinking about
changed.
that, right, a lot has changed. Learning how to use a computer at 70 years old. Um, and she ended up working like in a church office. It was a little bit more lenient, I would say.
Hmm.
But from then it was just like, I'm going to try to do and learn and make as much and just like have as diverse skill set as possible because I never know what's going to happen. Um, and I think that from there that was like, I'm just gonna throw darts at a wall and see what
See,
sticks.
see what sticks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's great to segue into, like, what's the focus today? Tell me a little bit about where things are at for you here in March of 2024. What are you working on? What has your focus? What are you passionate about?
Probably the most prevalent is I'm releasing a hard copy cookbook at the end of this year.
Awesome. I
So
didn't
I
know that.
just released a digital version in January. Um, and then the full length will probably be about 75 to 100 Southeast Asian recipes, either for my own family or people in the community. And actually going to Thailand on Monday. So
What?
gonna
Awesome.
work on, yeah, more development and, excuse me, the photography for it. Um, but the inception basically of that um, was my nonprofit called Courageous Kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of in that whole identity crisis in high school and leading up to college age, it was like, I need to figure out where I came from, right? My grandparents, like, I think they tried to protect me and tried to just like sweep things under the rug. Like, you're just one of us. It doesn't really matter where you came from. But there was this really like longing for me to figure out my identity, especially because I started working with youth, mostly youth of color through Parks and Rec department, and like encouraging them to like learn about themselves and their identity, and I couldn't like teach them that or encourage them to do that without knowing my own.
Yeah.
Um, so it was in my 20s, so date me, um, where I essentially booked a one-way ticket to Bangkok and was like, I'm just gonna go there and like learn about my motherland. So my mom is actually half Thai, half Lao.
Okay.
Um, and I'll just teach English because that's what most young
Yep.
travelers do, backpackers do. Um, and then I got there and I had doors slammed on me because I wasn't white. Um, and because they told me like, well, if you stand in front of the classroom, the kids and the parents won't think that you'll be able to teach them English because you look Thai. And so it was this like weird reverse racism.
Mm,
And it was like, well, I'm one of you. Like, I was naive enough to think that they would embrace me, but instead it was like this complete rejection. So there was like this feeling of not really belonging in the US. And then I go to like my motherland and feel the same way. Um, so I started volunteering because I was like, I need to fill my time, need to do something. And I didn't want to have like the traditional expat, or I don't want to say traditional. I didn't want to have the expat experience where it's like you're not part of the community at all. You don't speak the language and you can just party and live a life of luxury.
yeah.
So I ended up staying with a Thai family. I did a homestay for like 3 or 4 months, just immerse myself in the culture. It was really scary, really lonely, but it like made me just sit with myself and kind of figure out like what I wanted to do and what my purpose was. Um, and I started volunteering with someone that I met from Instagram, actually, an American guy, and he was helping a lot of, excuse me, women and children that were kind of in and out of the sex work industry, um, trafficking, and refugee families. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. He was just like, here's a number of a lady, contact her and meet up with her. And like, if you're still interested after you meet her, give me a call. So just like threw me right in the middle of
Wow.
Bangkok. Um, anyway, I loved it, but I also saw like a mirror, right, to my family. It was like, wow, this could have easily been me. Like
Hmm.
living in the slum, 16 people to a room, no beds, like no kitchen, um, digging through the trash for food.
Yeah.
And it was just like all my shit just like washed away, right? Like who am I? Like this first world person coming in, like I need to find myself. Like I found myself through them. But it was just like this huge full circle moment of like this is the reality for many people, and we're so caught up in our own stuff, um, that I find like the people with the least are sometimes the happiest because they don't have to worry about all the materialism, the
Yeah.
superficiality of titles and bullshit. It's like we have each other and we're just trying to survive today. Um, and so I started like teaching English to them because I didn't really know what else to do, and they were always hungry, starving. And so then I started like having dinners with them before the English lesson. And all the students were like way more interested in the food, than
Yep.
the English lesson. And
Surprise.
so like it basically became cooking classes in English. And they were really responding well to it. Sometimes that was like the only like the largest meal they'd had all week. So then they were like looking forward to coming over to my little apartment and cooking. And like, because I didn't speak their language, and they didn't really speak English, we had to use food as our medium.
Mm.
But the response was so great that like my friend, co-founder, he was like, let's just do this regularly as a program. Like, let's have a weekly cooking class. You can teach English, and then they can learn actual like life skills. I mean, a lot of them are already cooking for their families.
Yeah.
Um, and we ended up starting like hosting pop-ups, like before pop-ups were a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Hosting like food festivals around Bangkok, like getting um some press from like, yeah, just getting some press and like teaming up with chefs and hotels and restaurants, and it was just crazy. It kind of blew up. Um, and then Airbnb approached us and they said, "Hey, we're piloting this program called Airbnb Experiences. Do you want to put your classes on there?" And I'd never like talked to adults before. Like I'd never
Mm-hmm.
formalized anything. I didn't even know Thai food. I had to teach myself, like University of YouTube. Um,
Great place to learn.
yes, yeah, self-taught. So basically we started a 501(c)(3) called Courageous Kitchen, hosting and it was the first social enterprise in Bangkok, but essentially like tourists will come and we'll give them a full market tour, choose their ingredients and take them back to the community house. And then the students that I trained are now like leading the classes. So that's been going on for about 10 years. Um, a little slowed down and things have kind of changed because of pandemic,
Yeah.
right? But so during pandemic, of course, I was like, well, I can't just sit here and do nothing. And these kids and families, they still need help. So I started another company called Tuk Tuk Box.
Box.
Um, and crazily started another company, but it is an e-commerce um, model. And it started out as sending Southeast Asian snack boxes to your doorstep. So subscription box model.
Mm-hmm.
And we're the first Southeast Asian snack box in the US market, and I believe still the only after 3 years.
So think
And
HelloFresh for Southeast Asian
exactly,
cuisine.
HelloFresh
Yeah.
for Southeast Asian snacks.
Yeah.
We had a pho meal kit. I don't know if you're familiar with pho.
Oh, I
When you're
love
from the
pho.
Northwest.
Yeah. I love pho.
So basically, like you can order and like, yeah, get like a pho meal kit to your door with a recipe, or like get a snack box to your door, and then proceeds go back to Courageous Kitchen. And so now I'm working on compiling all those recipes and like making one like anthology of my
Wow.
journey. So
That's so cool. It's coming full circle. And
yeah, long-winded version of why the cookbook.
yeah, I mean that process of really seeking your identity and finding yourself, going back to Bangkok, immersing yourself in the culture. In my research prepping for this, like I noticed that you've mentioned returning to your why during
Mm.
tough times has always been important for you. And it sounds like that process that you went through when you visited Bangkok really helped you find that. Can you expand on what that why is for you and how it's guided you throughout this journey?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as solopreneurs, many of us go through the roller coaster of emotions
Oh, all the time.
all the time, imposter syndrome, whatever it is, because you're the only one. Like, is this idea good? I don't know. And then you respond to yourself, right? Like, who do you bounce these ideas off of? And I think when times get tough, when times get tough, it's always like, what is my reason, right?
Mhm.
So for me, it's my parents for sure, to maybe live out like some of the things or the dreams that they never even were able to. My dad died when I was 10, um, and he was actually a chef
Mm,
in Washington. Went to culinary school there, and then died pretty young. And then my mom, she has maybe a middle school education. So she was left widowed with 4 kids, and like has kind of just done like manufacturing jobs. Never had the privilege to go any further, right? And so I was asking her recently, probably a few months ago, like, do you, when you were younger, like what did you dream about, mom? because I'm always like this big dreamer.
Yeah.
And she was like, that word is not even in our vocabulary. Like, I've never even thought about, like, she'd never even thought about it till I asked her. She was like, you just wake up and you just work. And for me, that sounds like a horrible life.
Right.
Um, and I want to be able to have the freedom, but also to take care of my mom, of course, and the rest of my family, and to kind of break these, as cliche as it sounds, generational curses, but also there's been a lot of generational poverty. We came from rice farmers from nothing,
Mm.
and then uh, so now to one be able to kind of help my family and show a different path, but also for other maybe Southeast Asian or Lao women, I do a lot of mentoring to
Yeah.
show them that like you don't have to necessarily live a traditional way or the way that your parents did. Like you can do it in your own way and you can be happy and have that freedom. So just empower others, I suppose.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
It sounds like you're living that experience every day through a lot of different ways. And
Yeah, I
I appreciate
try.
you being so open about your story. What have been like some of the most challenging moments in your entrepreneurial journey? Like you mentioned
Mm.
the solopreneur roller coaster, and it can be very lonely and challenging at
Yeah.
times. Like what have been some moments that you look back on that have really been impactful, and how did you navigate them?
I think that one for sure is like
Yeah.
just feeling alone. Um, and then like, am I good enough? Is this idea even worth pursuing? But kind of going back to that why, it's like, no, I want to do this.